A power-drunk executive walked past suffering without blinking, until her own child showed her what real strength looks like. Rosalind Harrington commanded empires, but couldn't connect with the one person who mattered most. At 37, she wore success like armor, tailored suits, flawless hair, eyes that calculated profit margins instead of recognizing pain. As CEO of Harrington Dynamics, one of the nation's leading tech firms, she orchestrated decisions affecting thousands of lives daily, yet remained blind to the small life walking 3 steps behind her. Her son Leo trailed in her shadow, 8 years old with gentle eyes that absorbed everything his mother refused to see. He carried a battered sketchbook everywhere, filling pages with families embracing, strangers offering kindness. Moments of human connection that never existed in his actual world. His drawings revealed what words couldn't, a desperate hunger for the warmth his mother had frozen out of existence. 5 years earlier, Rosalind's marriage had imploded when she discovered her husband's year-long affair with his assistant. The betrayal didn't just wound her, it transformed her into something impenetrable. She erected emotional fortifications so massive that love itself couldn't scale them. Her son became collateral damage in her war against vulnerability. But across town, a different kind of strength was being forged in hardship. Clinton Reeves understood loss intimately. At 36, his weathered hands told stories of honest labor and impossible choices. 3 years ago, lung disease claimed his wife, leaving him alone with their daughter Bridget. A 7-year-old girl whose inherited respiratory condition kept her tethered to inhalers and hospital visits. Clinton patched together survival through delivery routes, weekend shifts, and repair jobs that paid in cash. Yet poverty never poisoned his spirit. He believed character revealed itself in how you treated people who couldn't repay you. His neighbors knew him as the man who cleared elderly sidewalks unprompted, who fixed broken appliances for single parents struggling to afford repairs, who always offered dignity along with assistance. His daughter Bridget fought her battles quietly, never complaining when her small body betrayed her, understanding beyond her years that her father was giving everything he had. When you have nothing left to give, kindness becomes the richest currency. These 4 souls were about to collide on a rain-soaked evening that would shatter everything they thought they knew about themselves. The downpour arrived violently. Sky turned from gray to black as water hammered the pavement, transforming sidewalks into rushing streams. Rosalind accelerated her pace, heels splashing through puddles, checking her watch obsessively. Their reservation started in 5 minutes. Lateness was intolerable. Leo gripped his precious sketchbook against his chest, protecting it from the deluge. He learned never to ask his mother to slow down. The lesson had been taught through repeated silence. Wind drove rain sideways, soaking Rosalind's expensive coat. She mentally composed a sharp message to her assistant about arranging better transportation. She barely registered the commotion ahead until Leo's small hand tugged her sleeve. On the sidewalk, Clinton knelt in the rain, arms wrapped protectively around a collapsed stranger, an elderly man whose legs had failed him, whose body shook violently against the lamppost. Clinton's voice remained steady, reassuring. "Stay with me, sir. Help's coming." Without hesitation, Clinton stripped away his jacket, frayed, worn, the only real coat he owned, and draped it across the old man's trembling shoulders. Rain immediately soaked through Clinton's shirt, but he never flinched. Supporting the stranger with one arm, he used his free hand to dial emergency services. Leo stopped walking. His eyes widened, witnessing something sacred. "Mom," he whispered, pulling harder on Rosalind's sleeve. "Mom, look, that man's helping him." Irritation flickered across Rosalind's face. She started to order Leo forward when something compelled her to actually observe what was unfolding before them. This man wasn't performing for recognition. No cameras captured his sacrifice. No audience applauded. He simply helped because another human being needed help. His clothes were drenched. He was shivering, yet his voice remained gentle, his hands steady, his entire focus devoted to the stranger in his arms. Something unfamiliar stirred in Rosalind's chest, a sensation she almost didn't recognize. It felt like ice beginning to crack after years of being frozen solid. Leo's voice pierced through the rain's roar. "He gave away his coat, Mom. He's freezing now, but he doesn't care." Rosalind couldn't respond, couldn't move. She stood paralyzed on that rain-soaked sidewalk, watching a stranger sacrifice personal comfort for someone he'd never met before. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something beyond numbness. Clinton managed to help the elderly man to his feet as ambulance lights appeared in the distance. But the stranger remained unsteady, still trembling, clearly needing shelter. The nearest protection was the restaurant awning, the same upscale establishment where Rosalind held her reservation. Clinton guided him carefully, one arm supporting frail shoulders, speaking softly the entire way. "Just a few more steps, sir. We'll get you somewhere dry." They barely reached the entrance when a security guard stepped forward, face twisted with contempt. "Sir, you can't bring him here. You're dripping water everywhere. Our guests won't appreciate this." Clinton's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. He collapsed in the street. He needs to sit down until the ambulance arrives. The guard crossed his arms. "That's not our problem. Move along." Without arguing, Clinton lowered the old man onto a dry corner near the door and knelt beside him. He pulled napkins from his pocket, grabbed earlier from a food cart, and began gently dabbing the old man's face. Leo watched from nearby, small fists clenched at his sides. This wasn't right. This wasn't fair. Before Rosalind could stop him, Leo darted forward. He pulled tissues from his own pocket and crouched beside Clinton, helping dry the old man's trembling hands. Clinton looked up, surprised, a small boy in expensive clothes with kind eyes and gentle hands. He smiled warmly, genuinely, pushing back the cold with pure warmth. "Thank you," Clinton said softly. "That's very kind of you." Leo's cheeks flushed. No one ever called him kind. No one ever noticed him at all. Rosalind stood frozen near the entrance, watching her son kneel in a puddle to help a stranger. Internal warfare raged. The instinct to maintain her image, to stay detached, to be the cold, untouchable so everyone expected battled against something else, something buried so deep she'd almost forgotten it existed. Part of her wanted to join them. The guard stepped forward again, voice sharp. "Ma'am, your table is ready. I suggest you collect your son." Leo looked up at his mother, eyes pleading. "Mom, why are they being mean to him? He was helping." The question hit Rosalind like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to respond, to explain, to rationalize, to do what she always did. But no words came, because the truth was simple and devastating. She had no answer, and in that moment, she realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped teaching her son what truly mattered. Paramedics arrived moments later, taking over the elderly man's care. Clinton stepped back, soaked to the bone, but visibly relieved. He thanked the medical team, exchanged quiet words with them, then turned to find somewhere warm for himself and his daughter. Bridget had been waiting nearby, huddled under a small overhang, her thin jacket pulled tight around small shoulders. She ran to her father the moment he approached, wrapping arms around his waist. "Daddy, you're all wet," she said, voice small and worried. Clinton smiled down at her, brushing rain from her hair. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Let's get inside somewhere warm." "Okay." The restaurant was their only option. Clinton knew they didn't belong there. The menu prices in the window made that painfully clear, but Bridget was shivering, and he needed to get her out of the cold. They found a small table near the door, far from the elegant dining room where Rosalind and Leo were seated. Clinton ordered hot water and requested nothing else, explaining quietly to the server that they just needed a moment to warm up. The server's expression made her thoughts painfully clear. Across the room, Rosalind sat in the private VIP section, bathed in warm golden light. Crystal glasses gleamed. Silver cutlery sparkled. Everything around her whispered of success and wealth and power, but she couldn't focus. Her eyes kept drifting to the small table by the door, where the man from the rain sat with a little girl who looked pale and fragile. The girl started coughing, a wet, rattling sound that carried across the quiet restaurant. Clinton rubbed his daughter's back, face tight with concern. "Breathe slowly, Bridget. Nice and easy." He flagged down the server and requested warm water. "Just warm water, nothing else." The server hesitated, glanced at the manager, then walked away without responding. Leo had turned completely around in his chair, watching with worried eyes. "Mom, that little girl is sick. Why isn't anyone helping her?" Rosalind felt her chest tighten. She wanted to look away, to return to her emails, to pretend this wasn't happening. But Leo was watching her now, waiting for her to do something. And that little girl's cough was getting worse. Without fully understanding why, Rosalind picked up her phone and began typing a message to her private physician, just in case. At his table across the room, Leo had opened his sketchbook. His pencil moved quickly across the page, capturing the scene from the rain. A man giving away his coat, an old man being held upright, kindness in the middle of a storm. When he finished, he stared at the drawing for a long moment. Then he looked at his mother, at her designer dress and expensive jewelry and face that never smiled, and wondered if she had ever done anything like that in her entire life. The question made his heart hurt in ways he couldn't name. He wondered if his mother had ever knelt in the rain for anyone. He wondered if she even knew how. Bridget's coughing grew worse. What had started as a rattling in her chest became a desperate struggle for air. Her small body curled forward, hands clutching the table edge as she fought to breathe. Clinton was on his feet instantly, one hand on her back, the other searching frantically through her bag. The inhaler was empty. His blood ran cold. He'd meant to refill the prescription yesterday, but the pharmacy had been closed, and he'd been working a double shift. And now his daughter couldn't breathe. "Help!" he called out, voice breaking. "Please, someone help my daughter. She has asthma." The server glanced over, then looked away. The manager stepped back toward the kitchen. Other diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one moved, and one except Leo. The boy shot to his feet, chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Mom!" His voice rang through the restaurant, high and desperate. "Mom, please. You have to help them." Rosalind looked up from her phone. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Old instincts told her to stay seated, to let someone else handle it, to protect her image. But her son was staring at her with tears in his eyes, and across the room, a little girl was suffocating. Something inside Rosalind shattered. She rose from her chair and strode across the restaurant, heels clicking with purpose. She pulled out her phone and dialed her private physician without hesitation. "Dr. Callahan, I need you at Meridian Restaurant immediately. A child is having a severe asthma attack. Bring everything." She ended the call and crossed to Clinton's table. Without a word, she shrugged off her cashmere coat, a coat that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and wrapped it around Bridget's trembling shoulders. "Help is coming," she said, voice steady. "The doctor will be here in minutes." Clinton looked up at her, shock and gratitude warring on his face. "Thank you. I don't know how to." "Don't," Rosalind said quietly. "Just focus on your daughter." Leo appeared at his mother's side, his small hand slipping into hers. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. For the first time in 5 years, Rosalind Harrington had done something that had nothing to do with power or profit or image. She had simply helped someone who needed help, and it felt like breaking through the surface of frozen water, painful and terrifying and alive. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing lights and medical equipment. Clinton held Bridget's hand the entire way, murmuring reassurances while paramedics worked to stabilize her breathing. Rosalind followed in her car, with Leo buckled in the back seat. She didn't question why she was doing this. She didn't analyze it. She simply drove. At the hospital, Bridget was rushed into the emergency room. Clinton stood in the hallway, soaked and shaking, watching the doors swing closed behind his daughter. He had never felt so helpless in his life. An hour passed, then 2. Rosalind stayed, though she couldn't explain why. She sat in the waiting room with Leo, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, a small, warm weight that she'd forgotten the comfort of. When the doctor finally emerged to say that Bridget was stable, Clinton's legs nearly gave out. He slumped against the wall, covering his face with his hands, and for the first time since his wife's death, he allowed himself to cry. Rosalind watched him for a long moment. Then she walked to the vending machine, bought 2 cups of coffee, and brought one to him. "She's going to be okay," she said, voice softer than she'd intended. Clinton took the coffee with trembling hands. "Thank you for everything. You didn't have to. I know." They sat together in the quiet hallway, 2 strangers connected by a storm. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," Clinton said eventually, staring at the floor. "Lung disease. Bridget inherited her condition. Every time she can't breathe, I see." He stopped, unable to finish. Rosalind was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprising herself, she spoke. "My husband betrayed me 5 years ago. I found out he'd been cheating with his assistant for almost a year." She paused, the old wound aching. "I think I stopped trusting anyone after that. Stopped feeling. It was easier to be cold than to risk getting hurt again." Clinton really looked at her for the first time. He didn't see the CEO or the designer clothes or the icy reputation. He saw a woman who'd been wounded so deeply that she'd forgotten how to love. "Being cold keeps you safe," he said quietly, "but it also keeps you alone." The word struck Rosalind with unexpected force. She thought of all the nights in her empty penthouse, all the dinners with Leo where she never looked up from her phone, all the moments she'd missed because she was too afraid to feel. Across the room, Leo stirred. He blinked awake and looked around until he found Bridget through the window of her room, small and pale, but breathing steadily. He pulled out his sketchbook and began to draw. When he finished, he walked over to his mother and held up the picture. It showed 4 people standing together, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Underneath, in careful letters, Leo had written one word: family. Rosalind stared at the drawing for a long, long time. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred that she'd spent years building an empire commanding boardrooms, closing deals worth millions of dollars. But she'd never, not once, been included in a child's drawing of family. The simple picture, drawn with crayons on hospital paper, meant more to her than any contract she'd ever signed. The photograph appeared online the next morning. Someone at the hospital had recognized Rosalind and snapped a picture of her sitting beside Clinton in the waiting room, her designer coat wrapped around a child who was clearly not her own. The headline was ruthless. By noon, the story had spread across every business news outlet. Rosalind's phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from board members demanding explanations. The company's stock dipped by 3%. That afternoon, she faced an emergency meeting with Harrington Dynamics Board of Directors. "This is a disaster," the chairman said, voice cold. "You were photographed in a hospital with some unknown man and his sick child. The optics are terrible. Investors are nervous." Rosalind sat at the head of the table, face expressionless. "I helped a child who was having a medical emergency. I fail to see how that reflects poorly on the company." "It reflects poorly because you looked vulnerable," another board member snapped. "Emotional, unprofessional." The words cut deeper than Rosalind expected. Vulnerable, emotional, the very things she'd spent 5 years trying to eliminate from her life. That evening, she returned home to find Leo sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for her. "Mom, can we see Bridget tomorrow? I want to bring her my drawing." Rosalind hesitated. The board's warnings echoed in her mind. The stock price, the optics, the carefully constructed image she'd spent years building. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said, voice flat. Leo's face crumbled. "But they're our friends now." "They're not our friends, Leo." The words came out harsher than she'd intended. "They're strangers. What happened last night it was a one-time thing. We need to move on." She saw the hurt flash across her son's face, saw the way his shoulders slumped, saw the light in his eyes dim, and still she couldn't take the words back. That night, Clinton received no message from Rosalind. No call, no explanation, just silence. He sat by Bridget's hospital bed, holding her small hand, and told himself it was for the best. Women like Rosalind Harrington didn't belong in his world. He'd been foolish to think otherwise. But the memory of her eyes in that waiting room, the crack in her armor, The glimpse of warmth beneath the ice stayed with him long after he turned out the lights. Leo disappeared on a Wednesday. Rosalind came home from work to find his room empty, his bed made, and a single piece of paper on his pillow. The note was written in careful, shaky handwriting. "Mom, I know you're scared, but Clinton is good. Bridget is good. They're not going to hurt us. Please don't push them away. I love you." For 3 seconds, Rosalind couldn't breathe. Then panic exploded through her chest. She called the police. She called her security team. She called everyone she could think of, voice cracking, composure shattering like glass. Her son was gone. Her son, who she'd neglected and ignored and taken for granted. Her son, who'd only ever wanted her to see him, was gone. She searched for hours. Every street, every park, every place Leo had ever mentioned. The rain started again, turning the city into a gray, weeping blur. It was Clinton who found him. Leo was huddled under the awning of a bus stop 3 blocks from the hospital where Bridget was still recovering. He was soaking wet, shivering, clutching his sketchbook like a lifeline. Clinton crouched beside him, heart breaking at the sight. "Hey, buddy, your mom is looking for you. She's really scared." Leo looked up, eyes red from crying. "I didn't want to run away forever. I wanted her to understand. She's not bad, you know. She's just scared. Like Bridget gets scared when she can't breathe." Clinton sat down on the wet bench, letting the rain soak through his clothes. "I know, Leo. Fear makes people do things they don't mean. She pushed you away because the board people got mad at her," Leo said quietly. "But it wasn't about you. It was about her being afraid of what they would think." For an 8-year-old, he understood far more than anyone had given him credit for. Clinton put an arm around the boy's shoulders. "Your mom loves you. I can see it in her eyes, even when she doesn't show it. Sometimes the people who've been hurt the most have the hardest time showing love." Leo leaned into him, exhausted. "Will you wait with me until she comes? I'm not going anywhere." 20 minutes later, Rosalind's car screeched to a stop at the curb. She was out before the engine died, running through the rain, mascara streaking down her face. She dropped to her knees and pulled Leo into her arms, holding him so tightly he could barely breathe. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, baby. I've been so scared of getting hurt that I forgot. I forgot to love you the way you deserve." Leo wrapped his arms around her neck. "It's okay, Mom. We can start over." Behind them, Clinton stood in the rain, watching the mother and son he'd somehow become entangled with. When Rosalind finally looked up and met his eyes, she didn't look away. For the first time, she let him see the tears. The next morning, Rosalind called an emergency board meeting. She stood at the head of the table, hair still damp from the rain, eyes still swollen from crying. She looked nothing like the icy CEO they were accustomed to. She looked human. "I understand your concerns about the photographs," she began, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I understand that optics matter in this industry, but I need to make something very clear." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "I am a mother first and a CEO second. I spent years forgetting that, and it almost cost me my son that I will not make that mistake again." The chairman leaned forward, expression skeptical. "And what does that mean for this company?" "It means I will continue to run Harrington Dynamics with the same competence and vision that tripled our market value in 3 years. But it also means that I will no longer sacrifice my humanity for your comfort." No one spoke. "If the board finds that unacceptable," Rosalind continued, "then I suggest you begin searching for my replacement. But I doubt you'll find anyone willing to work as hard as I do, or as capable of leading this company into the future." She picked up her bag and walked out, leaving stunned silence in her wake. That evening, she drove to Clinton's apartment. The building was modest, peeling paint, narrow hallways, the faint smell of cooking from a dozen different homes. It was nothing like her sterile penthouse. It felt like a place where people actually lived. Clinton answered the door with Bridget at his side, looking healthier than she had in days. "I owe you an apology," Rosalind said, voice quiet. "I let my fear control me. I pushed you away because I was terrified of what it might mean to let someone in." Clinton studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, that same warm, genuine smile from the night they met. "Fear is a hard thing to outrun," he said, "but you don't have to do it alone." Behind them, Leo and Bridget were already talking, heads bent over Leo's sketchbook. Bridget pointed at a drawing and giggled. Leo's face lit up. Rosalind watched her son smile. Really smile, the way he used to before she forgot how to pay attention, and felt something shift in her chest. Maybe it wasn't too late to thaw. 3 months later, everything had changed. Rosalind still ran Harrington Dynamics, but she left the office by 6 every evening. The board had grumbled at first, but quarterly profits silenced their complaints. It turned out that a happy CEO was just as effective as a miserable one, maybe more so. Clinton had found steady work as a maintenance supervisor for a large apartment complex. The job came with health insurance that covered Bridget's treatments, and for the first time in years, he stopped lying awake at night worrying about medical bills. But the biggest change was the one no one could measure. On a warm Saturday evening, the four of them gathered around Clinton's small kitchen table. The apartment was cramped. The chairs mismatched. The plates chipped at the edges. But the table was covered with food that Clinton had spent all afternoon preparing, and the room was filled with laughter. Leo sat beside Bridget, showing her his latest drawing, a family standing together in front of the house with a big tree in the yard. "That's us," he explained proudly. "Me, you, my mom, and your dad." Bridget studied the picture with serious eyes. Then she looked up at Rosalind, who was helping Clinton set out dessert. "Miss Rosalind?" Her voice was small and hesitant. Rosalind turned, surprised by the formality. "Yes, sweetheart." Bridget twisted her napkin in her hands. Would it be okay if I called you something else? Something like—" She stopped, suddenly shy. Rosalind crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "Like what, honey?" Bridget's cheeks flushed pink. "Like Mom. Someday. If that's okay." The words hit Rosalind with the force of a tidal wave. She thought of all the years she'd spent protecting herself, building walls, refusing to let anyone close enough to hurt her. And here was this fragile, beautiful child offering her something she'd never expected to want again: a family. Rosalind blinked back tears and pulled Bridget into a gentle hug. "I would love that, sweetheart. More than you know." Across the table, Clinton watched the scene with shining eyes. He met Rosalind's gaze over his daughter's head, and the look that passed between them said everything words couldn't. Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep on the couch with a movie playing softly in the background, Clinton and Rosalind stood on his tiny balcony, looking out at the city lights. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Rosalind admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "After Owen, I convinced myself that love was just another word for weakness." Clinton took her hand, his fingers rough and warm against hers. "Love isn't weakness. Love is the only thing that makes any of this." He gestured at the city, at the sky, at everything worth living. Rosalind leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't feel cold. She felt home. Inside, Leo shifted in his sleep and reached for Bridget's hand. Their small fingers intertwined, two broken halves becoming whole. And somewhere in the distance, rain began to fall again. But this time, no one was standing alone in the storm. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with romance. They begin with a stranger giving away his coat in the rain, a child who refuses to look away from injustice, and a frozen heart finally learning that warmth isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing a person can choose. If this story reminded you why kindness matters, show some love by hitting that like button for the Outlaws Chronicles. What act of unexpected compassion changed your life? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one.